You've probably pinched an inch of your own stomach and blamed modern life for it. The couch, the fast food, the endless scrolling instead of walking. It's an easy story, and it feels true. Ancient humans moved constantly and ate lean, and only we, sitting in our climate-controlled boxes, got soft. Here's the part that should stop you cold. Some ancient humans were almost certainly obese, thousands of years before a single fast food restaurant existed, and the evidence is carved in stone, wrapped in linen, and written on some of the oldest medical documents we've ever found. This isn't a story about a handful of unlucky outliers either. It's a story about exactly which ancient humans could afford to get fat, and which ones never had the chance, and what that split tells you about power, food, and bodies that hasn't actually changed as much as you'd like to believe. Here's what you think you know. Ancient humans were lean by default, hunter-gatherers burning constant calories chasing food across open land, with obesity showing up only once fast food and desk jobs arrived. That picture is true for a huge slice of prehistory. But ancient humans spans hundreds of thousands of years and wildly different lifestyles, and lumping all of it into one lean, active silhouette flattens a much stranger, more revealing story. To see where that story actually starts, you have to look at a small limestone figure carved roughly 25,000 years ago in what is now Austria. Start with the obvious puzzle. If Paleolithic hunter-gatherers were burning enormous amounts of energy just to survive, how do you explain the Venus of Willendorf? Discovered in 1908 near the village of Willendorf and dated to roughly 25,000 years ago, this small limestone figurine depicts a woman with an exaggerated heavy body, wide hips, a full belly, and pendulous breasts, carved with obsessive detail while her face is left almost blank. She's one of dozens of similar Venus figurines found scattered across Ice Age Europe, from France to Russia. Here's where it gets strange, though. Most archaeologists studying these figurines argue they weren't meant as literal portraits of real bodies walking around a campsite. In a world where hunting failed often and starvation was a constant background threat, a heavy, fertile-looking body may have functioned as a symbol, an idealized image of survival and successful childbirth, carved by people who rarely, if ever, saw a body like that in real life. So the honest answer is more interesting than a simple yes or no. Genuine obesity in the deep Paleolithic almost certainly existed only as an idea, a hope carved into rock, not a common physical reality. The bodies doing the actual hunting and gathering stayed lean out of pure necessity. That tension between the body people wanted and the body their environment allowed turns out to be the real starting point of this whole story. But here's the real question. If Ice Age humans couldn't physically become obese in large numbers, when did that actually change? The answer arrives the moment humans stopped needing to move constantly to eat. Agriculture, and specifically the surplus grain storage that came with it, created something hunter-gatherers never had access to: a reliable, banked food supply that didn't require daily physical effort to access. That surplus didn't spread evenly, though. It pooled at the top. Bioarchaeological and paleopathological studies on ancient Egyptian mummies give us the clearest window into this. In 2011, a team of cardiologists and radiologists working on what became known as the Horus study, led by Dr. Randall Thompson, CT scanned dozens of Egyptian mummies, many of them from priestly and royal households, with guaranteed access to bread, beer, and meat, far beyond what an average laborer would ever see. The scans revealed calcified arterial plaque, clear evidence of atherosclerosis, in a striking number of these preserved bodies, a condition closely linked in modern medicine to a high-fat, calorie-dense diet sustained over years. Separately, skeletal and mummified remains attributed to members of Egypt's royal family have shown signs consistent with obesity and metabolic disease. Findings researchers connect to a diet of rich, unrestricted food available only to Egypt's ruling elite. Meanwhile, skeletal remains of ordinary Egyptian farmers and laborers from the same era show none of this. Worn joints, hard physical labor, lean frames, the opposite condition entirely, living in the very same civilization at the very same time. Obesity, once it became biologically possible, immediately became a luxury item. Here's the part nobody talks about. Once obesity existed in a population, ancient physicians noticed it almost immediately, and they didn't like what they saw. The Ebers Papyrus, An Egyptian medical text dating to roughly 1550 BCE includes remedies aimed at reducing excess body fat, treatments involving specific diets and preparations meant to shrink a body considered unhealthily large. This is one of the earliest known medical documents on Earth, and corpulence was already a condition worth writing a cure for. Centuries later, in ancient Greece, the physician Hippocrates observed directly that sudden death was more common among men who were naturally fat than among lean men. A clinical link between excess body weight and mortality risk recorded roughly 2,500 years before modern cardiology confirmed the exact same relationship. Later still, the Roman physician Galen described corpulence as a genuine medical condition requiring treatment, not simply a cosmetic issue, prescribing exercise and dietary restriction to patients wealthy enough to have overeaten in the first place. Notice the pattern hiding in plain sight here. Every single one of these medical observations comes from a physician treating the wealthy. Obesity wasn't a disease ancient doctors worried about broadly, because for most of the ancient population, it simply wasn't possible. It was a disease of surplus, and surplus, in almost every ancient civilization, belonged to a very small number of people at the very top. Step back, and something uncomfortable comes into focus. For most of human history, being fat wasn't a personal failure or a personal indulgence. It was a direct, visible readout of social position. A heavy body in ancient Egypt, Rome, or Greece announced, without a single word, that this person had reliable access to bread, meat, and wine, far beyond what physical labor alone could provide. Leanness, by contrast, was the default condition of anyone doing the actual work that kept a civilization running: farming, quarrying, building. The Venus figurines carved millennia earlier weren't wrong to treat a fuller body as something worth celebrating. They were simply describing a body that, in their world, almost nobody could actually obtain. That link between weight and wealth didn't stay confined to Egypt, Greece, and Rome either. Move forward into medieval Europe, and the same pattern repeats almost exactly. Feasting was a display of power reserved for nobility, while peasants working the fields stayed lean out of necessity, not discipline. Portraits of wealthy merchants during the Renaissance were frequently painted with fuller, heavier bodies deliberately, a visual shorthand for prosperity that everyone at the time would have instantly understood. A slim body in these centuries didn't read as healthy or attractive. It read as poor. Every later chapter in this story, that medieval feasting, those deliberately fuller Renaissance portraits, and everything that came after, traces back through this same ancient thread. For most of human history, across most civilizations, fat wasn't a symptom of abundance for everyone. It was a symptom of abundance for a tiny few, carved in limestone, scanned inside preserved mummies, and written down by physicians treating patients most of their society would never resemble. And now look at the world around you. Obesity today isn't confined to kings, priests, or pharaohs. It's widespread, spread across income levels, in a pattern almost the exact reverse of the ancient one. More common now, in many places among people with less access to fresh food, not more. The entire relationship between weight and wealth that held steady for thousands of years has, in the space of a single century, been turned almost completely upside down. You didn't invent your relationship with food and body weight. You inherited a much older story, one that started with a carved hope in a cave, moved through the arteries of a priest's mummified body, sat at the center of a medieval feast, and ended up, thousands of years later, completely turned on its head. You don't think about any of this when you look in a mirror. Not really. You think about what you ate yesterday, what the scale said this morning, what you should probably order for lunch. And that's not because the deeper story disappeared. It's because 25,000 years ago, someone carved a hope into limestone that almost nobody around them could ever actually become, and the shape of that hope has been shifting who it belongs to ever since. If you want more stories like this, the ones hidden in stone, in bone, and in bodies nobody expected to still be readable, stick around. There's a lot more.